All right, so here's the breakdowns of each individual team. First, we'll go with the Baltimore Ravens with the first overall pick. We know they took Jamarcus Russell, Dwayne Bowe. And then in the third round, they went with Brandon Mabane, and he is actually a hidden dev, so that's great for them on their defense. Then they get A.J. Davis, a cornerback, Eric Frampton, safety, so helping their defensive backfield, Brandon Fry to give them more depth on the offensive line, and then Jason Snelling, who was in the draft as a fullback, but he could also be utilized as maybe a power back, so I like that selection for them, especially with the 7th round selection. Next, with the Cincinnati Bengals, we see Ben Grubbs being selected here, right, with the first overall pick, with their first round pick. Then Matt Spaeth, a tight end there in the 2nd round. Tight end has been a problem for them time and time again. They tried Anthony Becht from the New York Jets. They drafted someone, I think, before, and it didn't really turn out well. But Matt Spaeth could be the answer there. We see cornerback Eric Wright. He was a 2nd round pick for the Cleveland Browns in real life, but he slips to the 3rd round, and he is going to provide them that defensive back option. Tanara Jackson, strong safety. Adam Hayward, middle linebacker. I just thought, let's get him a backup quarterback, and they had like Drew Hansen or something like that. So Jordan Palmer is going to go on the same team as his brother and back him up. So if Carson gets injured, there might still be a Palmer starting for Cincinnati. Then we have Jay Richardson with that 7th round pick from Ohio State. Not really a major pick there. I just saw Ohio State and thought, we'll put Ohio State and keep him in Ohio with Cincinnati. Then the Cleveland Browns, we know their 2 first-round picks, Joe Thomas and John Beeson. Now in the 2nd round, they make a very Cleveland pick, and that's drafting Anthony Gonzalez, Ohio State wide receiver. So they missed out on Ted Ginn, and I really thought about taking Ted Ginn with the 10th overall pick, but I decided to go smarter with the linebacker, because linebackers are harder to find. But I still got them that wide receiver, Anthony Gonzalez. We'll see how he turns out. Anthony Waters, middle linebacker, Garrett Wolfe, so another halfback there. They have TJ Duckett and Cadillac Williams, so Garrett Wolfe is that maybe 3rd option. Joe Cohen and Marvin White there finishes up the draft there. Their 6th round pick was sent to, I believe, the Saints in the Bledsoe deal. Then the Pittsburgh Steelers, who might have had the best draft of them all, has Joe Staley with the 1st round, as you knew, and then Deshaun Goldson is now drafted, and he is likely going to be the starting free safety replacing Rodney Harrison. So Dante Whitner, Deshaun Goldson. Then they drafted Lamar Woodley as a left end. He's a real-life pick, and he's going to be probably a very solid pass rusher for them. Andre Allison's going to be a bust probably, but you never know because Pittsburgh has a way of making mundane, bad receivers end up being really good. And then Henderson, David Jones, Malila, Purcell, mostly depth positions there, just backups. Then we move to the NFC North, and that's with the Chicago Bears. So they get Brady Quinn, who's going to maybe battle it out with Kerry Collins. I haven't decided if I'm just going to give Brady Quinn the start or if I'm going to have him fight for it. I might have him fight for it because that's more fun. Turk McBride at left end, maybe not the best end prospect, but Chicago's pride in their defense, so they went with them. They even did Brian Robinson in the 5th round, who is probably more likely going to be an impactful player on that team. They drafted Sidney Rice with their 3rd round selection, so we'll see some opportunity there. Also, it's always nice drafting a quarterback with a running back or a wide receiver right in the same class. That way they have that bonding moment together. Add depth with tight end and outside linebacker there with the 6th and 7th. Lions getting Lawrence Timmons, great pick there. Gerald Alexander, which was a real pick, I believe, from the Lions, getting a strong safety there. Lawrence Robinson, so I mean, will Robinson play that much? Probably not. They have Charles Rogers still. They have Troy Williamson. So Robinson might be a slot receiver, 3rd, 4th string option. They get Tony Hunt, so some more depth there. They lost Justin Fargas. They still have Kevin Jones and Reggie Bush, but Tony Hunt might be a good 3rd running back. Tyler Thigpen at quarterback. They're running right now with Brody Croyle, who's like a 58 overall, and surprisingly had a winning record last year. They still have Matt Hasselbeck, who is like a 70-something overall. His overall should make him the starter, but he didn't play well, and then Croyle started getting wins. Matt Hasselbeck actually could be a potential trade option, maybe if like the Arizona Cardinals, when they lose Michael Vick, or if I decide I want just to shake some things up, Hasselbeck might be a trade option, so Tyler Thigpen kind of takes that potential future backup role there in Detroit. And if Croyle starts to be awful because he's a 58 overall, Thigpen might be the starter too. Akeem Jordan's a good late round pick there, a good linebacker, and then we have some depth positions. Green Bay gets their tight end, Zach Miller. Second round pick, they take James Jones. And I reached on James Jones, but I know his potential, and he was a real life pick by the Packers. And I thought, I lost Donald Driver, might as well replace him with James Jones. And he's a real life pick. It fits well. And he's probably one of the better wide receivers at that pick, anyways, talent-wise. Usama Young, Steve Vallos, Ryan Smith, Jay Moore, Chris Davis. We got some more depth there. Steve Vallos and Usama Young might be some of the better ones. I mean, the 5th through 7th, I don't think. I mean, Ryan Smith, I'm trying to remember if he was a surprise, but he might have been a hidden dev. I'm not sure, but he might be a decent cornerback for them in the future, maybe as a role player. Lastly, we have the Minnesota Vikings finishing up the NFC North. So Leon Hall was their cornerback selection, and then Michael Griffin was their second first round selection. So 23rd pick was the part of the Randy Moss deal with the Patriots. And so basically the Vikings are stealing the strategy that the Carolina Panthers did last year. Panthers drafted Michael Huff, and they drafted another solid safety. They drafted 2 safeties in like the first round and the third round pick. And they became a dominant force for that defense, 2 young safeties. So the Vikings get a cornerback and a safety trying to rebuild that. They get Ryan Harris, who could be a starter for them at right tackle. They draft Isaiah Stanback, who is similar to Culpepper's style of quarterback, maybe a better fit than Tony Romo. But with Romo leaving, they needed a backup quarterback, and I thought Stanback was a good option. They get a punter, Brandon Fields, right? We look at some Martrez Milner, tight end. We'll see if he ever plays. They lost Dallas Clark, so maybe he might. And then we have Barksdale, McBean, some more depth there on defense. Cardinals, some big moves here. Calvin Johnson Jr. could have just won in the draft on its own. Terrell Brown is probably the next best player being picked in the 5th round. Tony Ugo might have a chance to start. I don't know how long his career is going to be. Quincy Black, Zach DOC, Leroy Harris, Brandon Condren, not expecting anything big from them. So Seattle, they went with Alan Branch with their first round pick, and then Samson Satili, and that's actually probably one of the better picks they did, getting that solid center in the 2nd round. They get some depth in the defense there with Alama Francis, the right end from Hawaii, Desmond Bishop. They needed some more depth at wide receiver, so Lejedu Nane. He's like 6'5". I know he becomes a tight end. So in real life, he was like a wide receiver tight end combo. So he might end up being a tight end. I might put him there if Dwayne Carswell leaves or so forth or retires. And then we have some more defensive picks with the last few. Then the San Francisco 49ers, we know LaRon Landry, Brent Selleck. They go with Johnny Lee Higgins at wide receiver, so we know that's not going to shape up too well. Jacob Bender, not bad. Offensive tackle there in the 5th round. Mike DeVito, good right end selection. And then I got another wide receiver, Jordan Kent. I'm trying to remember if he actually was a 49er, but not anyone really memorable. Then we have the St. Louis Rams. So they went with Jarvis Moss with their first pick, which, we'll see how that pans out. But then they drafted Kevin Kolb. So yes, they signed Tony Romo, but do you trust a backup from Minnesota? Was he really that great? And so now they have Kevin Kolb, who's going to compete for the starting role against Tony Romo. So Tony Romo might not get his start. It might end up being Kevin Kolb, depending how preseason turns out. Then Antonio Pittman, who was a real-life pick by the St. Louis Rams from Ohio State. Get some more depth there at running back after losing Marshall Faulk. Then we look at Roy Hall, Fred Bennett, and then they drafted the punter with a 7th round pick. Alan Barbre may be one of the better selections here for them. Some greater depth and maybe a potential starter on the offensive line. Switching over to the AFC West, Broncos take Justin Harrell, which, again, disappointment there. I mean, he's not the best first-round pick. Then they also go with Scott Chandler to give them another tight end option. LJ Smith has been okay, but he hasn't really progressed much. Then Brian Leonard, who's really, he's a decent running back, and they have him at fullback here, so he's probably one of the better fullbacks now. They draft Troy Smith to be a potential young backup for the Broncos. They still signed Brad Johnson, but they have Troy Smith and Brad Johnson, so a young and an old. Ren Robinson, never ever heard of him before, but he gets a chance here with Denver. And then Destin Fry, some depth on the offensive line. Now we move to the Kansas City Chiefs. We see Marshawn Lynch, who's a huge boost to their offense, giving Eli Manning another weapon. They have Justin Blaylock and Jermaine Bouchard. So 2 offensive linemen, both on the left side. They also have 2 linebackers right at those last 2 picks, Nick Roach and HB Blades. Steve Breston is going to be an option here, and Aaron Roos as a strong safety, kind of some middle round picks there. We see with Oakland now, they had a lot of defensive picks there early with Okoye, Nelson, and even Bradley with a 4th pick. They go wide receiver with Dwayne Jarrett, who went to the Panthers in real life. We'll see how he turns out in Oakland, and you never know, right? So there's a lot of these receivers that never panned out really well in real life, but in my reality, they could. And we've seen some, like I know PK Sam, who was picked by the Houston Texans as the Mr. Irrelevant, so the last pick of the draft. He's actually a reliable receiver for me. I mean, there's Chambers and other options that are better than him, but for a 7th round pick, 32nd overall, you turned out pretty well. So you never know which receivers are going to do well or not do well, but with Kurt Warner, he might elevate him. They get Colby Smith, running back. They get Casey Studdard, some depth on the O-line, and then Jeff Rowe as a backup quarterback. Not expecting much from him. Lastly, we got the San Diego Chargers here in the West. They have Chris Houston at cornerback. They end up going with Aaron Sears at right guard, so getting more depth on the O-line. Craig Davis, another receiver, again, one of those that may not pan out well. Craig Davis was a real-life pick by the Chargers, and I thought, well, he's here, so let's take him. We'll see if the LSU prospect is going to have a different direction here in his life here. And then we have Dan Bazoon and Marcus Thomas, both left end defensive tackle. Clint Session, who might be a decent role player there in the O-line. And then Mormino is just a filler on the O-line. Now we move to the South. We see the NFC South there with Robert Meacham being the first pick there from the Falcons. Jay Alford, a defensive tackle there in the 2nd round, some depth on the D-line. They draft another receiver. So they got Meacham, they got Mike Sims-Walker. And really, I mean, that was a good pick 5 years ago when they went with Kelly Washington and Bethel Johnson. They got 2 receivers, and they were jockeying between being starters and role players. And now they have Meacham and Sims-Walker, who can be starters or role players, depending on how they perform. Tyler Ecker, some depth there for tight end. Gaddis, Rufus Alexander, and Trey Lewis just going DB, linebacker, DT. So they get one of each rounding out their draft. Then we've got the top team in the NFC, Carolina Panthers, taking David Harris. Losing Michael Turner to the Patriots gets them to bring in another running back, Lorenzo Booker, with the 3rd overall selection. Again, they lost their 2nd round pick in the Ty Law trade. But again, they get basically Ty Law with that pick. They have Josh Beekman at right guard, John Bowie at cornerback. They get the punter, maybe in that 6th round, the 23rd pick. Baraka Atkins, Joe Falani. People who might not see the field, we'll see. Now we have the Saints. So their 1st round pick, Adam Carricker, we'll see if he turns out as he's supposed to. Now Greg Olsen ends up being the tight end pick. So they had Selleck and they had Zach Miller picked over him because of his drop. But now Drew Bledsoe has a real receiving option to go with his Brandon Marshall and receiving core there. So Greg Olsen is probably one of the best picks there for the entire draft. I mean, a 2nd round pick, Greg Olsen, is fantastic. They draft Drew Stanton in the 3rd round, and he slipped to the 3rd round. And so I feel this is a big steal for the Saints. This is someone that could fill in for Drew Bledsoe, who is either 34, 35, or 36. He's somewhere in that range. So any moment he could retire. And so Drew Stanton can learn under him as a backup quarterback. Then we got Roto at guard, and we got Ken Shackelford at left tackle, people I've never heard of. We'll see if they ever get a chance to be long-term starters. William Gay, good cornerback there in the 5th round. I mean, he's a good steal pick. Mason Crosby there at the 6th round. I mean, Matt Stover retired, so now they bring in Crosby. Pierre Thomas was still sitting there, and I thought, well, he really went to the Saints in real life, so let's get him here in New Orleans. And at that time, it was McAllister, Reggie Bush, and Pierre Thomas. And so Thomas he did have a lot of good success, but he was kind of drowned out by Bush and McAllister. But now it's going to be McAllister and Pierre Thomas. So now, because Chris Brown left the Indianapolis Colts, I believe. So now Thomas is going to be that number 2 back most likely. And then Kevin Payne, a filler safety. Tampa Bay Buccaneers, they get Darrelle Revis, one of the best cornerbacks maybe of all time, so he's replacing Rondé Barber. Tim Crowder as a defensive end. 3rd round, again, they've got Mark Bulger, they have Ryan Fitzpatrick still, and now they have Trent Edwards. So Trent Edwards, maybe that rookie. I doubt it. Maybe I allow him to compete, but he could be the starter. Maybe not. Maybe this year, maybe not. Depends on if Mark Bolger plays like his overall or if he plays like how he played last year. John Wendling, free safety there. I mean, I think I always liked him in Madden 08. So we'll see if he comes through for me and for Tampa Bay this season. Steven Nichols at outside linebacker and Kareem Brown at DT. Notice defensive back, linebacker, DT, just rounding out the draft. Now we move to the AFC. We see Josh Wilson just taking best available player, right? If you have a lot of great cornerbacks, take one. You're going to benefit from it. Andy Alleman at left guard. They did need a guard to start. We'll see if Alleman can be that guy from Akron. Then wide receiver, Yamon Figures, and I think Figures was a real pick by the Houston Texans too, and so I decided just to go with some of these real-life picks because if you're going to take a receiver, might as well go with who they really went with unless there's a justified reason. Ray McDonald, left end. We got Quinn Pitcock over there, DT from Ohio State. Ben Patrick, some depth at tight end, and then Thomas Clayton, someone who I doubt will see the field. Then we have the Colts with Brandon Merriweather. They do draft Kenny Irons, so you got Brian Calhoun, you got Chris Brown, you got Dominic Rhodes, Kenny Irons. We're going to see how their running back room shapes up without Edgar and James, but he's a big player to miss. And then you have Jason Hill at wide receiver. Again, Colts can make wonders out of wide receivers. Arnaz Battle did well with them, won a Super Bowl for them, and then went to Green Bay. Then you have Bobby Wade, who played well with them, but now is off to the Jets. They still have Marvin Harrison, Wes Welker, and Reggie Wayne. So any wide receiver that is added to the Colts are just going to be depth, and that's Jason Hill. Then you have Antonio Johnson, who was a really good pick. He had some hidden dev there for a 4th-round pick. Then Adam Coates at left tackle, another running back selected, and again, that is just me adding more depth, more competition. And then Darren Stone at strong safety. Now we've got the Jacksonville Jaguars, and they had a really good draft. When you look at Patrick Willis and Jamal Anderson, 2 good defensive players there to help be anchors for their level of defense from linebacking and pass rushing. Then Chris Henry at running back. I mean, we got Cedric Benson over there. Chris Henry's going to be Chris Henry. Dante Rosario at tight end. We got Lyle Sendlein and Oldenburg, 2 offensive lineman picks. And then Nick Folk. We'll see if he can be that solid kicker for Jacksonville. A decent 7th-round pick if you're getting a quality kicker. Then we have the Tennessee Titans taking Ryan Khalil with their 1st-round pick. Then they went defense for the next few. Anthony Spencer at linebacker, Paul Saliai, I don't know, whatever his name is said. And then Brandon McDonald. We see Paul Williams, who was a real-life pick for the Titans, a receiver who I don't have much promise for. We have Corey Hilliard at left tackle, and then Brandon Harrison at safety. Now we move to the East teams, and this is where we're going to probably finish up the draft here with the East and the NFC and the AFC here in the East. So Justin Durant was the first pick with a 2nd round, losing their first pick in the trade for Leinart. Jacoby Jones ends up going to the Buffalo Bills, and he's one of the better receivers that was in that range of that 2nd and 3rd round. Then in the 4th round, you see Savvy Piscatelli, strong safety, Dallas Sartz at outside linebacker, Derek Landry at DT, Will Herring at linebacker. So a lot of defensive picks there in the core of the draft. And then Cameron Stevenson at left guard. We'll see if this draft is enough to really propel them into the future here. Then we have the Miami Dolphins. They went with Aaron Ross at cornerback. And then John Beck, who was a real-life pick by the Dolphins. They have Steve McNair right now. They have Sage Rosenfels as backup. So I thought, they might be allured by John Beck. And so I decided to let him be picked by the team that truly picked him. And we'll see what happens with McNair. I mean, if he gets hurt, if he retires, John Beck couldn't have a chance at starting. Antoine Barnes, good pick there in the 3rd round, outside linebacker. Quentin Moses, pass rusher. LaRon McClain, one of the better fullbacks in the league at one time, so we'll see if he ends up becoming that. Chancey Stuckey, who was a Jet wide receiver who was drafted by the Jets in real life. We'll see if he has a better career with the Dolphins, and then whoever Herbert Taylor is. Then the Patriots. Now they have no 1st-round pick, but 2 2nd-round picks. They go with Corey Graham, getting one of the better cornerbacks in the league or in the draft, and then we had Marshall Landa, a right tackle. I moved him right inside of the guard, so they get a solid Pro Bowl likely guard with Marshall Yanda. And then we look at Kevin Boss, a tight end. So they have Leonard Pope, they have Billy Bajima, and now they have Kevin Boss. So we're getting these big tight ends to help Tom Brady out. And now they have Randy Moss. They have Torrey Holt, some more options. They did trade for Michael Turner. And now they have Ahmad Bradshaw. And Bradshaw, he was like a 6th round. He was a late round pick. But the Patriots reach on him to get that quality running back. Then they have Marvin Mitchell and Matt Trannon. We'll see if they ever make it on the field. As for the Jets, they have Levi Brown. So they get that offensive lineman. He slipped out of the top 5, top 10 even. Then you have Jonathan Wade at cornerback. I mean, again, there's a lot of cornerbacks. I think the Jets probably missed on Wade. I mean, there are better options, but you take who you can get. Then Tank Tyler at DT, Buster Davis at outside linebacker, David Clowney, who I think Clowney was a real life pick, or maybe was like a undrafted free agent, something like that. But whatever it was, Clowney was a Jet. Then we have Doug Dadish at center from Ohio State, David Irons, not the running back, but the cornerback there. Then we move to the NFC. So Adrian Peterson with the first pick. And then we have Eric Weddle with the second. So some really good picks there for Dallas. And then we have Manny Ramirez, who's going to be a good offensive lineman for them. Brandon Jackson. So here, that's in case. I mean, I was still under the assumption that Steven Jackson was going to be out for a portion of next season. When I got to the preseason, he was like healthy again. So I was looking at it as Adrian Peterson and Brandon Jackson were going to be the running backs. But it's going to be Adrian Peterson, Steven Jackson, and Brandon Jackson. Then we have Charles Johnson, who was a great pick. I mean, he's a good pick there as a 5th rounder. Punter Adam Podlosh, Nate Harris, and then Zach Taylor. Zach Taylor. Better coach than a quarterback, but just somebody taken. Then we have the New York Giants getting Posluszny. They ended up drafting Steve Smith. Again, a real-life pick, real-life receiver. There were a lot of mediocre receivers in this draft, and they were all picked by certain teams, and I just let it happen. Michael Bush at fullback. He was actually a running back for a while. He was picked by Oakland. We'll see how he does at fullback. Right now, they have Tiki Barber and Jamal Lewis at running back, so he might not get any playing time. So having Michael Bush at fullback might give him more playing time. Maybe someday he'll move into running back, but I might even consider doing fullback runs with him because I think Bush has a lot of potential. Doug Free, a good tackle for them. Zach Dial, some more depth for their linebackers, along with Corey Hall, who we'll see if he's depth or if he's practice squad material. And then Clifton Ryan, a DT. Then we're looking here at the Philadelphia Eagles with Ted Ginn, again, getting a solid wide receiver there. Victor Aberemuri, or whatever his name is, from left end from Notre Dame. And he was actually a real-life pick by the Eagles, and I did not know that until I was doing some graphics. So I didn't even try for that. Then we have Dante Hughes, cornerback, Tim Shaw, outside linebacker, Michael Okwo, middle linebacker, Josh Gaddis, and Kenneth Darby. We'll see what their potential is. And now the very last team, Gaines Adams for the Washington team, Tremaine McBride. They end up going with James Martin, Uchi Nwaneri, so 2 linemen. They do draft Matt Moore, so the quarterback competition is going to be Kellen Clemens, Chris Redman, and maybe Matt Moore. Bad quarterbacks there. They didn't do well. They were the second overall team, second worst team in the league. Jack Del Rio maybe could have been or should have been fired, but I'm giving him one more year to see how this pans out. I'm not too optimistic. Eric Weems at wide receiver, and then Brian Smith at outside linebacker. So I know this was a long draft video, but thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video and this presentation of this NFL reality that I've been creating here. So now we'll be getting ready for the next season. I will be using our T-Dog's progression tool, and that does shake up the league a little bit. So I'm looking forward to kind of some of those curveballs with some of the players who got upped and down.